one night I just sat down and said, all right, what do you want to do that? And the PCT popped in my brain. I'd already had thought about it, and I just decided to do it. I really thought I was going out there to have a very solitary experience and to test my wherewithal with months in the woods. And I had basically the opposite of that. I made great friends, and I never, ever spent a night camped by myself in the entire 6 months.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, where we talk to athletes, adventurers, and business owners from around the world of adventure sports. Whether you're climbing Mount Everest, starting a bike shop, or getting up off your couch to take your kids hiking for the first time, we want you to have the motivation and inspiration you need to chase that next adventure. The Adventure Sports Podcast is brought to you by Camp Crate, the leaders in fully planned self-guided backpacking adventures, as well as backpacking gear rental. You can check them out at campcrate.net. Before I knew better, I used to carry cans of food into the backcountry like a doofus. Obviously, I don't do that anymore. I use freeze-dried food, and I really only use Peak Refuel, the best backpacking food, the best freeze-dried food in the world. And if you keep listening to the episode, I can show you how to save 20% off an order if you want some. The PCT has been on my mind the last few weeks, and so for today's revisited episode, I wanted to find somebody on the podcast who had done a thru-hike of it and just hear their story. So I ended up choosing this episode with Philip Kramer. I hope you really enjoy it. Unfortunately, I found out today, literally today, that which is yesterday for y'all if you're listening on Thursday. Anyway, found out that I've got some pretty bad arthritis in both of my knees, so it doesn't look too promising that I'll be able to do this trail anytime soon, unless I can figure out a way to fix this. But I know we've talked about a little bit lately about injuries and dealing with your identity changing once your body can't really keep up. And if you're dealing with it out there, I'd love to hear from you, because I'm a little bummed out, but I know things will be all right, and we will find something to fill that adventure gap if I'm not able to go as intense as I could before. I knew that for the last year because of a basketball injury, but if you're dealing with that, I'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email, message us on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you want, and how you deal with it, how you cope with it. And I love living vicariously through the people that can do these things. Maybe you're not physically hindered, but maybe you can't because of responsibilities. You can't go out there and do the PCT or the AT or the Tour Divide or some other adventure. Maybe it's all those other reasons. So that's just as difficult sometimes when it's so many things that are out of your control. But anyway, I just want to give everyone a word of encouragement saying, there's a million passions out there that you haven't discovered about yourself. You just kind of have to be forced to discover them sometimes when you're not able to pursue the things you loved or you did love. But if you have learned to discover new things about you, call us and let us know how you've done that. If you have a story to tell, like always, please get in touch because we want to tell it. So I hope you have a really good Thursday, and you'll hear from me again tomorrow. And I hope you have a great weekend after that. So, all right, here is the episode.
Hi, friends. Kurt here. Thanks again for listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I have Philip Kramer for you today, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Philip wrote a book recently, Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, Northern California. And so, as you might guess, we're going to be talking about the PCT today and about section hiking as well as through hiking. And we love these hiking shows. They're always fantastic, and everybody has their own unique perspective. So, Philip, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Philip, you grew up in the Pacific Northwest.
I did, yep. Lifelong resident.
And you are now living on one of the San Juan Islands.
I am. I chose Orcas Island because it has the most hiking. And if you're going to be stuck on an island, I need some hiking.
Well, the San Juans are beautiful. I mentioned before I hit record that we went sailing in the San Juans It was, I can almost name it to the day, and the reason is because my wife was pregnant with my 14-year-old. So, no, I'm
That
sorry,
is a memorable time.
16-year-old, not my 14, my 16-year-old. Yeah, I had the wrong kid there, so it's been 16 years. But it is gorgeous. Describe for our listeners, just so they know what we're talking about, what the San Juan Islands are about.
Yeah, I mean, there are like 600 or 700 islands, and obviously there's just a few that are big. There's tons of small ones. A lot of them actually are completely state parks, and it's just kind of a web of inland sea. The Salish Sea surrounds us. Lots of conifers and a lot of rock. They actually call Orcas Island the Rock. It's less rain than a lot of places in Western Washington, and it's kind of just a gorgeous little locale that you can explore your entire life and find little pockets around every corner.
It sounds wonderful. You know, I love the Pacific Northwest and the San Juans especially. So beautiful up there. It's just every time that we've visited, we see so many new things. Not to mention the wildlife, you know, whales and
Yep.
you know, all that stuff. It's amazing to me. And you're living in an amazing place on the island like that. So what did you have to do to be able to establish a life out on the island?
Essentially have work that was not dependent on me being in the thick of the city. And both my wife and I have that, and we're pretty fortunate to do that. We've been thinking about moving out here for a very long time, so it took us it took some years of prep. And we have a 2.5-year-old, our daughter Faye, and she was actually kind of the impetus to actually make it happen, because we really wanted to have a childhood experience out of the city for her.
How special. That's
Yeah.
awesome. You know, we chose the same thing. We raised our family in the mountains, and we still had to go into the city, however, but it was wonderful to be able to raise the kids close to nature. You know, nature is their home. They feel very comfortable there, and that was our goal, and it worked out. So good for you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. We're on the right path then, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
You never know as a parent.
So you have a lot of adventure sports that you love, and we're going to be talking about hiking today, but I want to touch on some of these others. You said that you are a traveler. You love surfing, skiing, and snowboarding, playing in the snow in the backcountry in a variety of ways, sea kayaking, and that you're headed to Morocco coming up soon to go surfing, right?
Yeah, I am.
Wow. So what is that like? Have you been there before?
I have been to Morocco before. It was a long time ago, and it was for work. It was a photography trip, which are always very different than a play trip. And this trip is honestly, I'm meeting up with my best friend he lives in Maine now, and we don't get to see each other that often. So we're just taking off for a little over a week, and we're just gonna surf every day until we can't move our arms anymore, I think.
Wow. Okay, I got to throw this out there because I know some of our listeners are going, are you kidding me? This guy lives on an island in the San Juans. He's going to Morocco to surf. He's a photographer. He has location-independent work. How do you get to that? How does that happen in a life?
It was something that I set my targets on pretty young. I was still in high school, and when everyone started talking about what you're going to study in college and what college you're going to go to, I just kind of felt that it was a little bit different of a path that I wanted, and it didn't involve a job as I knew jobs to look like through my own parents' experience, and for whatever reason, travel photographer popped in my mind, and I think that was just a product of, hey, this will get me to cool places all around the world. It'll get me out of this little town that I'm in, and I make a living doing it, hopefully. And there have definitely been hiccups along the way with that making a living part. The photography world has changed a lot in the 15 years that I've been doing it, and I wish it was as easy as my first 5 years, but it's getting harder as more and more people are able to make amazing photos with their phones, or a little point and shoot or whatever. And so it's been an interesting experience, and the writing part is brand new to me, but that allows me to branch out and just have a wider skill set.
Oh, there you go. How do you think Instagram has impacted the world of photography?
Yeah, I mean, I love Instagram. I'm on there. It essentially, my desire to photograph also came from, I just wanted to share with the people that I cared about what I was seeing and experiencing, and Instagram is perfect for that. So I still use it heavily in that way. I also use it now for research. So I can, if I'm looking to go wherever to photograph, say I wanted to photograph in Morocco or go surfing, I can search and have visual references for places that I think look really interesting or promising. And it's just amazing how much is at your fingertips now. And at the same time, the photography world is oversaturated. There's an insane number of great images all around the world.
Yeah, no doubt. There was a day when, people were going to have to buy a camera that was somewhat complex. They were going to have to take classes to learn how to use it. They had to develop film. They might even learn how to develop film. And it was kind of an expensive hobby that required a lot of patience, because you would take a shot and it might be weeks later before you ever got to see what it looked like.
Yep, absolutely. And you might have really messed up and then you just got nothing. I started out on film, and that was the first several years of my career were all lugging rolls of film around and fighting with the airport staff to not send them through the x-rays in little tiny countries that didn't really care what I wanted, and trying to get them home and developed and hoping that I had done everything right in those moments. Most expenses around traveling have fallen. It's much more affordable to fly across the world at this point. And there's a ton of tools that make finding places to stay and finding like-minded individuals to team up with. It's all gotten remarkably easier.
I was laughing when you talked about trying to convince people not to x-ray your film. I had that experience in Heathrow, and we were flying to Kenya, and I had a lead pouch that I'd put my film in.
Yeah, I remember those.
I walked up to the x-ray machine, and I said, "This won't show on your x-ray, so just look in it. Put it on the belt, sir." I said, "Just take it and look at, there's no sense in it going through. It won't show on your x-ray. Put it on the belt, sir." So I set it on the belt. I went through the x-ray, and then they stopped me on the other side and said, "We can't see what's in that, sir. We're going to have to search your luggage."
I tried to tell you.
Nice. Yes. And I almost missed my flight to Kenya. It was very, very close. But anyway, those were different days, when it came to photography. But now with digital photography, everybody has a camera on their phone, and everybody has a phone on their person. So the world has just, orders of magnitude more pictures out there. Yes. So does that make it harder for you to make money as a photographer?
Absolutely, yeah. The direction that I took when I started was actually licensing my images through stock agencies, and that has gotten. You can still do it, and there's a vibrant business of that out there, but your price per image has gone way down, and so I think if you're there's still a career there for people that can throw the hours at it, but it's a very different it's just a very different ball game than when I started.
Right. And there's a lot of competition.
There is a ton of competition, which I don't think is a bad thing, but it is certainly noticeable.
I think that photography just goes hand in hand with adventure sports. It doesn't matter what the sport is. Photography is the way that we can share it with others, like you said. And I know when I go on a hike, I want to share it with my family, and you just reach for the camera. It's what you do. So when you go hiking, how much camera gear are you carrying, and are you there to take pictures, or are you there to hike?
Yeah, it really depends on what I'm doing. I actually have times that I intentionally head out and I do not take a camera, and those are, sort of just I'm going for the experience. It's just me And I don't want to turn on that part of my brain that is looking every direction and around my shoulder constantly trying to get that right image. And then other times, of course, I have, just my phone, or I just have a little fun point and shoot, and get what I get, but I'm not too serious. And then there's times where, when I've been working on this book, obviously I'm looking to make quality images to share with everyone. And so I'm lugging, usually I try to keep it around 5 pounds, which isn't too bad considering how much I have carried in my past. But for backpacking, I'm not gonna carry 20 pounds of camera kit along with me. So I keep it pretty minimal and try to get by with a little less than I would if I was working out of a car or a kayak or whatever.
Right. So when you're headed out to do your best photography, are you using just a standard digital SLR, or do you have a different format?
Yep. Nope, just a standard 35 millimeter full frame DSLR. And I've never been too attached to any particular brand. I flip around a little bit, and I don't keep a big collection of lenses, which kind of frees me up to switch to whatever camera seems like it's going to fit my needs.
Right on. So let's talk about hiking, but I'd like for just a minute to hang on to the photography subject while we do. When people go hiking, I keep telling people this, and until they've experienced it, it's hard to know what I'm talking about completely, because you almost have to live it. But you will find a place that's beautiful, but then you'll pitch a tent. You'll wake up the next morning and the lighting is just perfect, and there's a little mist, going through the trees, and it's suddenly you're like, oh, and you want to capture it, and you grab your camera, you take a bunch of shots, and then when you look at them later, they really don't look that great. Right?
Yep.
So what's the trick? How is it that, you go to these magical places, you have these amazing experiences, how do you get it captured on film, or as probably these days we'd just say as a digital image?
Yeah. Well, I continue to repeat that experience. There are times that I absolutely get an image that I really feel captures what I was seeing, and there are probably more times where I look at it and I go, oh man, that doesn't even come close to the experience I had there. And I would say that it is getting easier. Digital cameras certainly have a greater ability to capture. I mean, we're just getting technical here, but they have a much wider range versus slide film, which is what I started with. And so there's a lot more leeway with what you can do to convey that experience visually onto the viewer. But a lot of that is sitting in front of the computer trying to basically take a raw file that its only mission was to capture as much information as possible, and you're trying to pull out the reality of what you want to present to your viewer in it. And I didn't know that going in, and I don't love sitting in front of computers. So it's sometimes it's a little bit like pulling teeth, but when it does work, it's very, very worth it.
It's kind of fun because before digital photography, people would try to do the same thing you're talking about by developing their own film, developing the images, and they had tricks that they could use, shadowing parts of the images they shoot it onto the paper, and this and that and the other to try to draw out what they want to emphasize. Now you do it all electronically. Yep.
And sometimes on a touch screen. It's very futuristic.
Wow. Well, let's talk about hiking, and we may come back into photography just a little bit, because I know that people that are out there hiking, they also love to take pictures. So it'd be cool if you could give us some tips,
Sure.
Just some ideas. But why do you hike? What's the point?
I think at the very base of that question, I hike just to experience whatever may occur. It's I guess at the heart of those kind of adventures, there's a big curiosity. I want to know what the other side of that mountain looks like, and I'm kind of interested in what's going to happen to me in that process, whether it's a storm system moving in and having just a wild sleepless night, who knows, or whether it's the that sunrise is going to be one of those sunrises that you just don't ever forget because it was, mind blowing. Maybe it's an encounter with wildlife, but just that sort of unplanned, unknowable experience of the natural world.
Isn't that what adventure is all about?
Absolutely, for me, yep.
Yeah. And do you have the same problem I do that I can't hardly stop when I'm out because I always want to see what's around the next curve or over the next hill? Or oh, man.
Absolutely, yeah. Through hiking is great for that because, it's in your best interest to keep going if you want to get several thousand miles. But it's a bit of a problem at times. It's hard for me to just sit down and take in one viewpoint and be satisfied there. I want to know what's around the next bend.
I think some people hike for the athletic side of the sport. Mm-hmm. They like to watch the miles tick by and they like to see how quickly they can do it and how far they can go and how, and for them, hiking has a lot to do with the energy it takes to get there. And other people, It's more like, no, I'm here for the experience. I'm here just to enjoy what I'm seeing and feeling and smelling and tasting. And it's not about being super athletic. It's about shuffling through the woods and having experiences. Where would you put yourself on that continuum?
I'm definitely pretty far down on the experience level and willing to sacrifice the physical feats for a photograph or literally just finding a spot I like and deciding, you know what, I'm going to spend the day exploring this area. I have pushed myself physically, and there are times where that is what I'm craving, and I just want to see what am I capable of. But most of that is honestly just driven by the people who are really interested in the speed feats and summiting X number of mountains is like, wow, I can see what they can do. Are they that different than me, or can I actually do some of that too? But my de facto stance is I'm walking pretty slow and I'm looking around a lot.
Yeah. I think that's where I am too. I'm really there for the experience. Sometimes it feels kind of invigorating to pick up the pace and try to cover some quick miles, but really for me, it's always, when I go hiking, it's destination hiking 90% of the time. I'm going to be somewhere I want to see,
So yeah, like I said at the beginning of the episode, I used to carry cans of food into the backcountry, and I know there's a lot lighter things to do, but there's just a lot of options that aren't good for you or are either too heavy, and that's why I really do use Peak Refuel now. They're a new backpacking food company, and I say backpacking food, really it's just freeze-dried food that you can use for anything. I've actually eaten it for dinner before with my family because it's real food. It does not taste like backpacking food or hunting food or something that you're only going to eat in the backcountry. It's delicious, high in protein, nutritious. It is going to refuel you. It is filling, huge portions, and I really encourage you all to give it a shot. At least try it out. And that is peakrefuel.com. And if you want to get 20% off an order, use the code ASP20. And that's capital ASP and then 20. Now, back to the episode.
Let's make a distinction there. I just mentioned destination hiking. There's section hiking, and there's through hiking. So for people that are new to the sport, what are those things?
Yeah, so I mean, a destination hike could be, all these things could be any sort of range of mileage or whatever, but a destination hike is obviously, you say, hey, there's this lake on the map, and I've read this little article that says there's a great campsite, we're going to go there. And you hike your 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever miles out there, and that's your spot, and set up camp and stay for as long as you've got. And then you have section hiking, which is kind of I guess it's a sibling of through hiking, where you have these long distance trails, and they can obviously be broken up into whatever length of adventure you're willing to take. And um, you maybe only have the ability to take a weekend at a time. And so you're going out and you're covering however many miles you're comfortable doing in that weekend, planning these little short trips. Kind of related to destination hiking. You probably have an idea where you're starting and where you're ending, but there's generally a longer distance covered, and the goal is kind of to piece together over the course of months or years or a lifetime, covering an entire trail. And then through hiking is, all right, I want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, and I'm going to do all of it in one hiking season. And that's, a whole other beast from those other two.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when we're talking about these long trails, we've talked about these a lot on the show, but for new listeners, we're talking about things like the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, maybe the Continental Divide Trail, and they're varying distances, but 2,000 to 3,000 miles is what we're talking about, thousands of miles. And so through hiking is trying to conquer the whole thing, often in one trip.
Exactly.
And that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. And for me, it was mind-blowing even as I was doing it. And even after I completed it, it's just one of those things that, it's the culmination of a lot of perseverance. And it's a pretty monumental experience. I absolutely encourage anyone who's interested to go give it a whirl. And it is not for everyone at the same time.
So you thru-hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, which we call the PCT, right?
Yes.
North to south or south to north?
I did south to north.
So south to north, which is standard in 2013. Mm-hmm. And give us a couple of takeaways from that. What when you look back on it now, what's it about for you?
Oh, boy. Well, I think I'm still unpacking that, honestly. It really was driven just by I had been working a lot, and I wanted a break, and I wanted to sort of a chance to clear my head and maybe to take myself in a new direction. And one night I just sat down and said, all right, what do you want to do that? And the PCT popped in my brain. I'd always had thought about it, and I just decided to do it. I really thought I was going out there to have a very solitary experience and to test my wherewithal with months in the woods. And I had basically the opposite of that. I made great friends, and I never, ever spent a night camped by myself
really
in the entire 6 months. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Which was that was a hard adjustment at first. I almost quit about a couple weeks in. I thought, this is not what I signed up for. There's people everywhere. I could go hike somewhere else and be by myself, but I decided to keep going and I just kind of accepted that it was going to be different than I thought.
Isn't it always? Isn't that
it
what
always
adventure
is?
It's always
good life lesson.
Absolutely. But you roll with the punches, and then you have a life experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's amazing that you've done it, to be able to put that notch in your gun, so to speak. And I think it's awesome. Anybody that's done a through hike, it's life changing. Can you give us any hints about how maybe it impacted your life?
Yeah. Some of them, some of these little ways is just a lot of self-awareness about different things. Some of it's honestly kind of embarrassing because I went out there as, to be the mountain man, and I realized through that, that I actually really do enjoy having a soft bed and heat and a cappuccino in the morning.
Right.
So that's not a very glamorous or adventurous thing to say, but there's some truth to that. And it also it was a very reaffirming thing that I could sort of decide that this thing had value, and regardless of how I felt day in, day out, I was going to keep working towards that one goal, which, hiking from Canada to Mexico is not, it's not a standard goal, I don't think. And it's a very personal thing. And so that was, it gave me a lot of pride, I guess, to stick to it, because in my experience, anything that you're doing, no matter how much you love it, if you're doing it day in, day out, you're going to have days where you get a little bit bored with it. And the number of miles that I bet I didn't see all the beauty around me because I was just bored and tired.
Right.
That's just a reality of through hiking for me. And in those times, you look around and you go, what am I doing? And then you remind yourself that, this is actually important, and I don't have to do this, but if I want to keep doing it, I should. And so I just continued and ended up in Canada.
Nice.
And that applies, I think, to all sorts of different things in life. But I had some big changes waiting for me at home. When I came back, I ended up reintroducing myself to a friend of mine who I'm now married to. And we have a 2.5-year-old daughter who was very much a wonderful surprise, but a surprise nonetheless. And I often chuckle to myself at how much I draw from my through hiking experience when I'm, a little bit sleepless in the middle of the night trying to get someone to go back to sleep, and just tired as all can be, and knowing that I've got to get up and I got to work some more tomorrow, and just keeping that perspective of what's important in life at the forefront.
I love what you just did there. Seriously, I've been saying this now for years on the show. When we go out and we have an adventure, we learn things about ourselves. And when we come back to the everyday life, it's the lessons we learned having the adventure that we find most applicable sometimes, that help us through the everyday struggles.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's one reason to do it. In my mind, it's one of 1,000, but it's one reason to do it. It's what we learn about ourselves and the skills that we gain that, we can apply to the rest of life. So do you feel like it was kind of a rite of passage for you? Were you the same guy when you finished that you were when you started?
No, I think it did change me. I guess I kind of view it as a rite of passage into, I guess, another stage of adulthood. I think I was 32 when I did the hike, which by through hiker standards, that's a little older. And I often wonder about that, and I love asking other through hikers, what was this like for you? Because, I hiked with an 18-year-old and I hiked with, a 65-year-old through those time periods, and everyone had this remarkable transformative experience. And I don't think any of them would say that at the end they were the same person. And I love how that can apply to people throughout, different experiences of their own life.
Oh, yeah. Something that I hear people talking about when it comes to backpacking in general, doesn't have to be through hiking, but is staying out there long enough that you kind of, you shift into the rhythm of nature.
Yeah.
Or you know what I'm talking about? Did that happen for you? And how is it different than life off the trail?
Yeah, it definitely happened. Back to our performance question, the people who go out and hike the PCT in one season and do it as a physical feat, they're finishing in, under 2 months now. And I took 6 months. So I spent a long time out there, and that was purposeful. And I definitely, I can look through photos of myself on this trip, and they're unlike any photos that I've seen of me in my life. I am incredibly dirty, and I don't look like I care at all. And so just on the physical level, there is just this, I want to say, like an animalistic sort of being in me that comes out more with that time, and all those sort of societal things that exist for us humans here. Kind of, you just shed them slowly over time, and naturally, the longer you're out, the more you shed, and the less hold those have on your routines and what you're caring about.
Did you find it difficult when you re-entered regular society? Was there a bit of a culture shock and adjustment to get back into the normal routines?
There was, yeah. I have a pretty supportive network of friends and family, so I had a lot going for me in that front. But I finished and came right back to Seattle, and that was pretty shocking. It was. I can still remember the first thing that was really hard for me to get used to was just the noise.
Right.
The ambient noise of a city and all the hustle and bustle was. I could feel my nerves, just chafing with all that. I was anxious, experiencing all that for quite a while. And actually, I've noticed that we just moved up here to the island from Seattle. And when I go back to the city, it still takes a day or two for, the sounds of airplanes overhead to normalize. So that was a big one. And then just culturally, not everyone appreciates a through hiker, I don't think. So when you roll back into a city and you go to some social function and people ask what you've been doing and you've got this huge mangy beard and they see your suntan face and you tell them you just walked from Mexico to Canada. There's a lot of people that don't know how to relate to that or don't want to. And so there is a feeling of a little bit of misunderstanding and being an outsider that comes with that too.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, it's an amazing experience just to get out and backpack. And through hiking, that takes a lot of planning and commitment. People usually have to quit their job to do a through hike.
Yep.
That's a life planning, life altering sort of an event. But, I'm looking at your cover of your book here, and the subtitle says section hiking. Right?
Yeah.
And section hiking is fun, especially for people that have goals. It's like, I do want to walk the whole trail, but I can't do it all at once. Maybe I want to do it in pieces. I'm not sure the experience is quite the same, but how would you contrast the experience of section hiking versus through hiking?
Yeah. It's definitely not the same. And, I wouldn't put one above the other. But I would say that what I really came to love about section hiking was, I picked and chose where to go, based on what was happening in that place. So instead of hiking, there's a stretch of trail that goes over this place called the Hat Creek Rim in Northern California. And it's a 30-mile dry stretch. The only water you can get is down this very, very steep, no fun trail, to a spring that may or may not be dry. And most through hikers will cross through that July, maybe August. And it is, it's not the most pleasant. It's hot and you're carrying a massive amount of water. So for the book, I went down, since I had already had the pleasure of going through when it's dry and dusty. I went down I believe I went in May. And instead of being brown and brittle, it was just green with an amazing display of wildflowers. It's an area that has been burned. And so as things are coming back, there's just intense wildflower growth. And it was stunning. And there was water. So that's a huge advantage of section hiking, just being able to sort of pick and choose your seasons, when and where to go. If you don't like crowds, you can usually schedule yourself a time in spring or fall, or, sometimes pretty late into November if you're lucky in Northern California with the snow, and you're going to have the place to yourself. There's also significantly less pressure to keep moving. So if you see a side trail and it looks like it climbs up a peak that might have an amazing view of all your surroundings, or it goes down to a lake that looks like it'd be a pretty great place to swim, you can just tear off and head down there. And you can spend the night if you want. You don't have to stick to I got to do my 20, 30 miles today.
And that's something about through hiking. I'd like to point out, to finish a long trail like that in a season, you have to do the miles.
You do. Yep.
A lot
you
of
are
pressure
not going to get there otherwise. There is. Yep. And that pressure gets old. Yep.
Wow. So section hiking is more forgiving in that way then.
It is. Yep. And then on the other side, you don't get that that amount of time to be out there When you're through hiking, you have a lot of time, and there's a lot of freedom to be felt in that when you start out and you go, I have months out here. That does put you in a different mindset and allows you to kind of shed your home routines and responsibilities in a very different way than going out for a weekend or a week or even 2 weeks when you're section hiking.
Time for a quick message break. So you know that this show is brought to you by Camp Crate, and you hear that name quite a bit, but you might not know exactly what it is. Basically, Camp Crate is the bridge between people who want to have a backpacking experience but don't have gear and don't know where to start with planning. They're extremely helpful. They'll rent you the gear and they ship it right to your front door. If you just have friends that are already going, but you just are tagging along, but you don't have your own stuff, or you have gear but really don't know where to go, they can help you with all that. So go to campcrate.net or send them an email at support@campcrate.net. Their whole mission is that you get in the backcountry and you have an awesome time on a self-guided adventure. Back to the episode.
I think section hiking is something that everybody should do. It's
Yes.
achievable. Everyone can. When it comes to through hiking, it'd be great if everyone had the chance, but not everybody can.
Yep.
It's just tough.
Yep, it is.
Section hiking is doable, and that's one of the best things about it. So let's talk about your book a little bit, Philip. Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail in Northern California. Now, you said this was part of a 4-book series, and this book was written by you. The other 3 are written by other hikers. But let's dive into your section and describe for us what it's about.
Yeah, so my section, I pick up where the Southern California author leaves off in Tuolumne Meadows in Yosemite National Park. And the trail sort of cruises up through the northern end of the High Sierra and touches around Lake Tahoe area, and then goes through lots of fairly unknown, unvisited places in kind of the central part of Northern California. Lots of good stuff there, and also lots of, places where you're walking through clear cuts and on logging roads. It's a huge mix. And then you cut over across I-5 up by Mount Shasta, and you get to spend a lovely several hundred miles in the Klamath Range, which is one of my favorites. And then my book ends at the Oregon-California border.
So that's a pretty good chunk of distance, and Northern California is beautiful. I think you got a great part of the trail.
I did. Yes, I got lucky.
Wow.
Yep.
So,
and I think I covered just over 740 miles of trail.
740 miles. So you went back and hiked this trail again for the book.
I did. Yeah. When I thru-hiked, I was on a mission, and I certainly wasn't taking notes and keeping track of campsites and water sources, and I wasn't photographing for a book. I was just doing my own thing. And so for the book, I went back down and I re-hiked every chunk of Northern California, and sometimes I went back 2 or 3 times to a few areas where I got hit with bad weather and wasn't able to get much in the way of photos, and would go back and do a specific photo trip to cover it.
So is the book, just for our listeners so they know what it is it a how-to guide? Is it more experiential, more like a journal? Is it a photography book? What can they expect?
It's very much a how-to guide. It's there's lengthy trail description that's going to lead you through everything from the natural history of what you're seeing to, which way to head at a junction, whether it's marked or unmarked. It calls out sort of the best and more established campsites. Gives you a lot of information about side trips that I decided were worth including. And it basically lays out all of your resupply options, so nearby towns, trailhead access points. It's very much everything you need to know to plan a successful section hike on the PCT. And then as a bonus, you get to look at all these beautiful photos of the areas. So it kind of throws in some inspiration in that way. And it includes maps and elevation profiles. It's it's a pretty comprehensive resource.
Right on. And what's cool about this, I mean, there are books that talk about doing the whole trail, but they're not going to have the detail that this has, because this is a full book focused on just a quarter of the trail. So you can really dive in and get a lot more information there. Yeah, that's
you can.
cool.
Yeah. Yep. And we break, 740 miles of trail. That's if you throw that number at someone who's thinking about section hiking, that's pretty overwhelming. And so the book is broken down into 11 sections, and then those sections are broken even further down into legs. And depending on basically trailhead access and road access, sometimes you can build a day hike out of the information that's in the book. But you can also do a 1-nighter, a 2-nighter, or a 3-nighter up to, if you want to do all 700 miles in one go, then this has everything you need for that too.
I have to give you a little anecdote. I interviewed Jerry Roach a few years back, who wrote the book on the Colorado 14ers back in the day. And it was a long time ago when he wrote it, before GPS. And he measured the distance by counting his steps.
Wow.
And I was just thinking, well, that would sure change a hike. 10,332, 10,333.
Yeah, that's, I think, I don't know. That could have driven me insane to have to do that.
I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do it. So I assume you had the benefit of GPS to make all this work.
Yep, I did, and I took advantage of it. It's, I had actually never used a GPS before this book. I was always just kind of a paper maps and compass kind of a person. And occasionally, people who would come with me on trips would have a GPS, and I would sort of look at it, but never really pay much attention. And so I finally went out and got one and taught myself how to use it. And it definitely made my life easier for this project.
Yeah, no doubt. But it also means that your book is going to be pretty accurate.
Yep, it should. Yep. There's you look at the maps, and that is the path that I walked, and it successfully got me from point A to point B. So it should work for you too.
I want to go back to what you mentioned about the little side hikes, little side legs that you included in the book. So the call hiccuped just when you said that, but that caught my ear anyway. I wanted everyone to know that the book is not just about getting through the trail. And
exactly.
Tell us about some of those. That kind of piques my interest.
Yeah, those are some of my favorite parts, honestly. And I don't know whether that's just because I didn't have the luxury of exploring those when I did my thru-hike, but I was really interested in, what is within a couple miles of the PCT that is, shouldn't be overlooked. You're already out there. To get back out here is going to require a huge effort. So what do we have around us? And through that, I found these great campsites at little lakes that are anywhere from a half mile to 2 miles off the PCT. Typically, when you venture off the PCT, you're usually leaving some crowds behind. So you're getting a little bit of quiet for yourself. There's some that are just climbing nearby peaks. And in a lot of areas of Northern California, there are some pretty spectacular vistas. Up in the Klamath Range, you just have some amazing views over towards the coast, but then also back to Mount Shasta. And, the PCT has great views of Mount Shasta, but there's a couple places where you can, spend an afternoon climbing a peak and catch sunset up there. And you're just going to remember that. And so I tried to add in all those where I could.
You know what? While you were describing that, I scrolled down on your website, and I'm looking at the photographs that you have there, and I can see why you would go off the trail a couple of miles to get to some of this stuff. Amazing. So beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the goal of those photographs, to say, see, I'm not crazy. You really do actually want to put in the extra effort and climb up that other 2,000 vertical feet, because this is the view you're going to get.
Yeah. Wow. This is cool. So people are sitting there saying, yeah, and where is that website? What is that? So it's philipkramer.com, and that's Philip with one L and Kramer with a K. So
that's it.
philipkramer.com. And you can see information about the book there. You can see the photographs. What else is on the website that people could take advantage of?
Well, there's a collection of my other photographs from my years of travel. So you can look at Pacific Northwest landscapes, and you can also look at portraits in India or pictures of the Saharan desert and all over the world. And then I hope to be adding more PCT related things as we go, but for now it's just kind of a photo heavy preview of the book, and some of the photos are printed in the book, and some of them are things that didn't make the cut, and they're still pretty nice to look at.
Right on. And if you don't have Wanderlust already, maybe you need some help to get it. You should. You need to have Wanderlust in your life. I'm convinced it's a necessary part of living this life. Go to philipkramer.com and start looking at some of these photographs. And if that doesn't do it,
they help.
I don't know what will.
I hope they help. I agree. It's a good thing to have in your life.
Yeah, definitely. So you have had a lot of travel in your life, and I'd like your perspective on that. How has travel impacted you?
Yeah, travel. I mean, first and foremost, I grew up about 3 miles outside of a town of 2,000 people. And it was a great place to grow up, and it was a very small community, and travel just sort of exploded my idea of the world and laid out, just a huge array of diversity in everything from people to wildlife to, plant species. It's a pretty amazing place we live. And, if anything, I have been a lot of places, but if anything, that has just only convinced me that there are so many more to go. So that's been the biggest thing, just a broadening of my perspective, I think.
When you travel, are you one of these people who wants to just kind of see the landscape, the people, the culture? Are you the kind of guy that has to roll up your sleeves and get dirt under your fingernails? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've always found that similar to my hikes, it's kind of what I'm intending to do. And if I'm traveling for work and I've got to get, X number of quality photos from someplace, I'm pretty focused on that. It's hard for me to relax and just kind of let the culture or the place take hold of me. I'm really driven to get what I came for in terms of how I make my living. But if this upcoming trip to Morocco is not a work trip at all. And so I'm just going to roll with whatever comes my way. And, the intention is we're going to surf, but I'm sure we're going to meet some interesting people here and there, and they're going to offer us up some other experiences that we can't imagine at this point in time. And so I'll roll up my sleeves and go after whatever they are suggesting.
I've heard some statistics, and I should look it up so I know what they really are, but it's something along the lines of 20% of Americans have a passport, and of people that have passports, it's some tiny little percentage that's ever used it to get out of the country. Yeah. Americans are not well-traveled, and people around the world have even mentioned that to me in various interviews. Yeah, well, Americans don't have a reputation for actually seeing what's out there. I think that travel has a lot of value, but how does it shape perspective and give you a different appreciation, perhaps, for the rest of the world than what you might get if you didn't go?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think just, the thing that instantly came to mind when you said that is just seeing how people live differently all around the world it's just been sort of very opening for me in understanding how I live and how it kind of fits into the broader picture. I've spent nights in huts made of cow dung in the desert, and I've also spent nights in crazy mansions on the beach somewhere. So it's a very it's a humbling experience to just see all that and see the difference. But I think that's the biggest thing. I guess just being being in the world of humanity that that really makes an impression on my perspective and makes me look at what I have and what I'm doing, and it makes me appreciate it, and it also makes me aware that there are some things that are much more important than whether I had my coffee this morning. In the world, there's a lot of people who need a lot of help out there, and there's a lot of people that have a lot, and travel's one way that you get to experience some ways that those gaps can be bridged, I think.
Yeah, I like that. I look at a map, and a map is a giant question mark for me.
Totally.
And then when you go to a place and you're in the map, you're in the landscape, then the answers start to flow. And I just love that discovery, and the people you meet along the way, the landscapes, the climate, all of it, the foods, I just, I don't know, can't get enough of it. And I don't do enough of it. So there you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a very enriching experience. People are making things work all over the world in very different ways, and it's pretty impressive.
Well, you have certainly created a lifestyle that's allowed you to do a lot more of that than what some people are able to do. And I think that's really cool. I often mention on the show, adventure-focused lifestyles. They're out there, and they're different probably than the majority of Americans live, but there are ways to do it. Do you have any recommendations if someone says, you know what, I'm not ready for the 9-to-5 yet. I want to have a lifestyle that offers me these sorts of experiences. You have any recommendations for them?
The thing that helped me most, I think, was seeking out like-minded individuals, and especially people who had success with that. Early on, when I was starting out, I got an internship working for a Seattle-based photographer who's pretty well known. His name's Art Wolf, and that was game-changing in terms of both what I felt was possible, and also just in terms of opening up the world of people who are very interested in doing that and who have figured out ways to do that. The people that I think can, lead your own little quest in the right direction. And obviously you gotta have some self-awareness of what you're interested in doing, because if you want an adventure-based life, but you really don't want to be a photographer, then becoming an adventure travel photographer is going to lead you down a not that satisfying of a path. So you do have to do some sort of personal searching for just where you think you fit and what you want to offer up to the world in that realm of adventure lifestyle.
It's fun that you mentioned Art Wolf, and I had not thought of that name in 20 years, but I saw some of his work, I believe, in Backpacker magazine. It was back when I was in college, and as a result of that, I said, I'm going back to Colorado. So jumped in the car with a buddy, went to Colorado with a camera just so I could try to do what Art was doing.
Yeah.
I didn't even get close, but it was fun. He inspired the trip, and ultimately, a year later, I lived here. So there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take, I don't think it takes a huge thing to lead to those kind of life changes. I think a lot of people are looking for something that is a big indicator, but you never know. It can just be seeing a photo and being like, oh yeah, I want to go there and try that. And then next thing you know, you've uprooted and changed your whole existence.
And why not?
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Yep, absolutely.
What we often forget is we could always go back again.
That is true. Yep, it's still going to be there.
You have an experience, you say, okay, I had an experience, I want more, or you might say, okay, that was good, I'm going home. But that's fine. Yep. You did it. So.
Yep, absolutely. And that happens on the PCT all the time. I met a lot of people in the beginning of the hike, and some of those went all the way to Canada, and some of them got to different points on the trail, and they said, I think I've had enough. I'm actually, I'm not really interested in walking anymore, and I'm going to go climbing now or whatever. So yeah, you just you got to pay attention to yourself and go have those experiences and see what it means to you.
Absolutely. Well, where can people get your book? I know it's coming out in March, but they can pre-order right now. So
You can. Yep. You can go to mountaineersbooks.org and you can order it there. And then, the huge friends over at Amazon also have it, so you can pre-order it there. I think IndieBound it can be pre-ordered at. And then after March 1st, it should be in pretty much all the bookstores around the country. And we have a promo code for you. There's a 20% off discount code. It is CaliHike, CaliHike. You can use it on mountaineersbooks.org for a 20% discount off of my book.
right on. That's awesome. So 20% off. That's CaliHike, like California. CaliHike, CaliHike. Right on. That's so cool. So Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, Northern California by Philip Kramer. I want to say a special thank you to Mountaineers Books.
Absolutely.
They're making a lot of this possible. And
they absolutely are.
We recently, if the listeners have been paying attention, they'd say, well, wait a minute. You've had a few authors on from Mountaineers Books now, and we have. And I really appreciate Mountaineers Books for sharing the wonderful authors with us, because you guys have such neat experiences. And it's all about getting out there and doing what you love to do and then helping other people to do it. And Mountaineers Books they're a nonprofit, right?
They are indeed. Yep.
They are all about helping people to go out and have these experiences. So I just want to say thanks to them. And by the way, we bumped into them at Outdoor Retailer last weekend.
Oh, good.
And got to shake hands and smile, and it was a lot of fun. So anyway, thanks
Excellent.
Mountaineers Books for what you're doing, and thanks Philip Kramer so much for putting this book together. You have opened up a bit of the wilderness for us to go explore now.
That's my hope. Yeah, I just, it's something I love, and I want to share it with people. And I also have to thank Mountaineers Books, because they gave someone with virtually no writing resume the go-ahead to try and write a book.
Yeah, but I'm sure you did a great job anyway.
I hope so. I just tell people, if the writing isn't your favorite, at least the photos are pretty.
The pictures are going to be great. We know this for sure. Well, the most important thing is that you made it now possible for people to better section hike this 750, is that what you said, miles of trail?
Yeah, just over 740. But, if you get the whole series, you've got over 2,650 miles to explore. And that's, I think that probably qualifies as a lifetime of adventure right there.
Oh, yeah. I think it would be fun to get this book and then do the different sections and just check them off in the book as you go, and say, okay, absolutely. I did that. Maybe journal a little bit about what you experienced and see how it impacts you over time. And I could see this as being a beautiful way to get outside. So,
yeah, that'd be a very wonderful way to use the book. That would make me very happy. Anyone who does that, you should send me pictures of your journal notes, if you don't mind.
Right on. Well, again, the website is philipkramer.com. The book is Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, Northern California. Philip, thank you so much for your time today, man, and thanks for all the hard work of getting this book together.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time with me, Kurt.
Oh, you bet. And for all of our listeners out there, I always say it, until the next show, make sure you do get out there. Have some fun.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you know somebody that would make a good guest on the show, or if you have a pretty cool story about the outdoors or adventure sports that you want to tell us, please call us and leave a voicemail at 812-MAIL-POD. That is 812-624-5763. You can also send us an email at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. Again, it is always helpful to leave us a review on iTunes. And if you'd like to be a supporter of the show, you can give $5 a month at patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. And links for all that stuff is also in the show notes. So thanks again for listening. And y'all get out there and do something so you can be on the show one day. All right, later. Also, don't forget, if you want to save 20% off the best backpacking food on planet Earth, go to peakrefuel.com and at checkout, use the code ASP20.